9. Schoolboy versus Rock Python. One day in 2002, while children played outside their school in Durban, South Africa, a 20-foot-long rock python made its way onto the property and set its sights on an innocent 10-year-old boy. It began wrapping itself around him, pinning the young student's arms to his side. In the meantime, the victim's terrified classmates scrambled up into some nearby mango trees and looked on in horror as the snake suffocated their friend. The python squeezed harder and harder until the boy's eyes closed and his head dropped back. Once he was dead, the hungry reptile ate the child. It took around 3 hours for the snake to swallow its victim whole. The other kids remained perched on tree branches the entire time, too paralyzed with fear to come down. Finally, the python slithered off toward a nearby stream, leaving no trace of the boy behind. This tragedy marked the first known case of a rock python eating a human. So what inspired the creature to act out of character? According to local snake expert Craig Smith, who spoke with the Sydney Morning Herald, the snake had probably recently come out of hibernation with an unusually large appetite. Locals searched for the offending python but never found it. Can you imagine how traumatized the other kids must be from witnessing something like that? 8. Leanne Mears. In 2014, an Australian woman named Leanne Mears received an alarming warning from Daniel Natush, a scientist who told her that a dangerous snake had been spotted lurking near her home on the Cape York Peninsula. Natush and his colleagues had recently put a tracking device on the 12-foot-long Australian scrub python, but they couldn't remove it from the area because it was hiding beneath a shipping container. The species is generally not considered a threat to adults, but it's known to go after pets and small children. Concerned for the well-being of Leanne's kids, who were 1 and 3 years old at the time, Natush advised her to keep her windows and doors shut. Mears cracked her door open for some air just days later, during a heat wave. She kept an eye on it the best she could and closed it before going to bed, not realizing that the snake had slithered into the house. In the early morning hours, it made its way into Leanne's bed, bit her, and began coiling itself around her leg. She awoke to find the snake attached to her body, sinking its teeth into her rear end. Ouch! Leanne reached her fingers into the reptile's mouth and forced it open, freeing herself from its bite. Thankfully, she managed to uncoil the python without any serious injuries. But this wasn't the end of the story. The snake returned to Leanne's house a year later and attacked her dog. The dog lost consciousness, but thankfully it survived. The researchers who had warned the family explained in a study that even though the snake had tried to eat its victims, it would never have succeeded because it was too small. But that doesn't make the thought of waking up to a python in your bed any less scary, does it? 7. Paul Rosoli. In late 2014, the Discovery Channel began airing previews for a documentary called Eaten Alive, promising viewers that they would get to see a man enter the belly of an anaconda. That man is naturalist Paul Rosoli, and his plan was to let a snake swallow him up to his waist. He put on a special suit and helmet, covered himself in pig's blood, and antagonized an 18-foot-long anaconda until she attacked him. The snake tried to swallow Rosoli's head and coiled herself around his body for over an hour. She had him pinned face down in the mud under her crushing weight, and he progressively grew weaker. Rosoli's heart rate began to slow down, and he felt his arm being crushed. Knowing he would be seriously injured if the encounter continued, he called for rescue. Viewers felt deceived by the show's promotions, and animal rights activists accused its creators of cruelty against the snake. Rosoli and the Discovery Channel claim that they made the special to raise awareness about endangered wildlife in the Amazon. But many people did not see this as an excuse to provoke a wild animal. Meanwhile, Rosoli reportedly suffered minor injuries but told Entertainment Weekly that it took him months to recover from the ordeal. What do you think about Rosoli being swallowed by the snake? Did he deceive viewers? Was that fair to the snake? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. 6. Kelvin Kataka. A Zambian truck driver named Kelvin Kataka told the press that he was lucky to be alive after a python attacked him on the job in 2013. Kataka didn't notice the snake in his vehicle before it struck him from out of nowhere while he was driving at a copper mine. The python lunged at the unsuspecting man and began coiling itself around his body, according to Kataka, who spoke with AFP from his hospital bed. A lengthy struggle ensued, and Kataka did everything he could to get the snake off him. He even bit the python before taking a knife out of his pocket and stabbing it several times. I think I would have grabbed the knife before biting the snake. The snake began to loosen itself, but soon enough it once again tightened its grip on the man. Kataka began vomiting blood and fainted. Two of his co-workers discovered the horror and killed the snake. They took Kataka to the hospital, where he spent over a month recovering. If it hadn't been for his quick-thinking colleagues, he may have been the creature's next meal. 5. Noah and Connor Barthe. In 2013, two little boys named Noah and Connor Barthe went to a sleepover at their friend's apartment in New Brunswick, Canada. At some point during the night, a large African rock python escaped from its cage and entered an air duct. The vent collapsed under the 14-foot-long, 100-pound creature's weight, and the snake fell directly onto the 4- and 6-year-old brothers. Jean-Claude Savoy, the father of the friend the boys were visiting, discovered their dead bodies and called 911. By the time police got there, it was too late to save the brothers, who were covered in blood and puncture wounds. An autopsy showed that they died from asphyxiation, and Savoy was charged with criminal negligence. Constable Stéphane Dugas, who had reported to the scene, testified that the snake made growling noises and lunged at the glass of its enclosure after Savoy returned it to its cage. The reptile was clearly agitated, leaving one to wonder if it might have eaten the boys given the chance. Prosecutors claim that the rock python had a history of escaping and aggressive behavior, and Savoy did not have a proper license to own it. They accused him of failing to take proper precautions to prevent a tragedy from happening. The allegations went even deeper when the possibility of foul play was brought up. Experts testified that it was rare for a rock python to act so aggressively, and that these creatures don't just go on killing sprees. Savoy's lawyer argued that the man thought his pet python was too large to fit into the air duct, and therefore saw no reason to secure it, even though it was accessible from the snake's cage. Speaking with CBS News, snake expert John Kendrick explained that a startled python will grab onto anything nearby for stability, and that in this case, it might have been the boys that it landed on. Savoy was ultimately found innocent. 4. Heng Chuan. One night in 1995, a 29-year-old rubber plantation worker named Heng Chuan went outside to turn off a water pump at his home in Penang, Malaysia. He was attacked by a python, and his brother called police to the scene. By the time they arrived, the man was dead. The snake had already swallowed his head and crushed some of his bones. Police shot and killed the massive reptile. Measuring 23 feet long, it was the longest python ever seen in Malaysia, according to zoologist Q Bong Heng, who spoke with the Associated Press. He said it was the first time a python had attacked a human in Malaysia, which means it was also the first time a python tried to swallow a person in the country. District Police Chief Mohammed Mokhtar Ahmed told the news agency that the python was 10 inches in diameter and weighed 308 pounds. Sadly, a human is no match for a snake of this size. By the time the victim crossed paths with it, he was more or less doomed. 3. Eric Arieta. A student zookeeper made a fatal mistake in 2008 by letting a Burmese python out of its enclosure at the Caracas Zoo in Venezuela. Biology student Eric Arieta was working the night shift alone when he decided to break the zoo's rules and free the serpent, which had only been at the zoo for 2 months. The 10-foot-long snake bit the 19-year-old's hand and crushed him to death. It was too late to save Arieta by the time employees discovered the python with his head in its mouth. It was trying to swallow Arieta, whose co-workers beat the reptile until it released its grip on his remains. It's not in a python's nature to attack a human, but it certainly can and sometimes does happen, especially when one feels threatened or perhaps has an unusually big appetite. Pythons aren't venomous, but they're massively strong. In addition to being able to easily asphyxiate their victims, they're capable of causing other serious injuries that sometimes even require stitches, if the person is lucky enough to survive. Only Arieta knew why he foolishly broke the zoo's policies and entered the snake's cage, and he took his reasons to the grave. But he clearly underestimated the creature's strength, and his needless and tragic death is a reminder of why the zoo had a rule against doing what he did. 2. Anaconda death grip. An 8-year-old boy named Mateus came terrifyingly close to death while playing near a creek outside his grandfather's ranch in Cosmorama, Brazil in 2007. An anaconda took the boy to the ground and began wrapping itself around him. Mateus started to suffocate, and his friends rushed for help. The boy's 66-year-old grandfather, Joaquim Pereira, beat the snake with rocks and stabbed it with a knife in a desperate attempt to save the boy's life. It took the man a half hour to uncoil the anaconda from Mateus's body. Thankfully, Pereira acted in the nick of time, and Mateus survived with 21 stitches to his chest. Anacondas and pythons rarely attack humans, but they can easily kill one within minutes. These unforgiving reptiles are known to target pets and small children more often than they go after adults. In 2016, an Australian mother named Tamara Thurgood awoke to find a python coiled around her 6-year-old son Tyler's stomach. The snake had already bitten the little boy in the face several times when Thurgood began fighting to free him. 2 relatives reported to the scene and killed the python. Miraculously, Tyler did not recall being bitten by the snake, and he had his eyes closed during the attack, according to Thurgood. Not only did she discover the encounter in time to save Tyler's life, he was evidently spared from the trauma of remembering the horrifying ordeal. 1. Anaporn Boon Makchui. While using the toilet at his home outside Bangkok, Thailand in 2016, a man named Anaporn Boon Makchui felt something jump up and bite him in his nether region. A 10-foot-long python had slithered its way through the plumbing and clamped its jaws down on his privates. The unfortunate victim spent a half hour trying to get the snake to release its grip. Finally, with help from his wife and a neighbor, he pried the serpent's jaws open, freed himself, and fainted. Emergency responders found the bathroom covered in blood. The snake was removed from the toilet and released back into the wild. Meanwhile, Anaporn was taken to the hospital, where doctors told him he would recover. He was happy enough about this to smile while giving interviews from his hospital bed. Hospital director Dr. Chutima Picharon commended the man's positive attitude, even though his wife and children were shocked. I guess it makes sense that knowing he was going to emerge from the incident with his privates intact was enough to make the man happy. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more about terrifying snake encounters, let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye.